10:27 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on the evening of Wednesday, January 10th, 2024. My name is Mark Kulak, Houstonic.live. And busy day today. Hope everyone's doing well. Hoping everyone had a good day. If you're in the United States, we've had some appropriate winter weather out on the east side of the states. Bad weather. A little bit of bad weather here and there is supposed to happen. And I just wanted to take a few moments. So I just wanted to have a little show tonight to review something which I mentioned before as part of our research show, recent history, 20 years ago history, whatever. That and it builds upon a hypothesis that I've had, and the speculation, which is quickly turning into a hypothesis, and that is that there was a widely projected large-scale bioterrorism attack, which was going to occur within the United States sometime in late 2021 or 2001, possibly early 2002, but I think it was going to be late 2001, based upon just some various metadata that we have. And this, the magnitude of the attack probably would have resulted in the deaths of several hundred people, or perhaps over 1,000, maybe 2,000. And this type of event would have had, let me just get a couple things here queued up in display 2. That's good. Hello, Kim. Good to see you. Hello, Holly. Good to see you. Hussies. I don't know what to call them. I've done a bad job of creating a community. I mean, I have good fans. I have great fans of the people who could find me. But it takes a certain amount of work and dedication to making a community. And that would be chat boards. That would be, of course, responding to people's communications and so on and so forth. And I've just kind of stunk at all of those things. I've had some good dialogue with a few other journalists, researchers in this particular space, if you will. And I won't say names, but you could probably imagine who I'm referring to. And although we like to share research and, refer to each other's work, I think there's a certain amount of it works good for us to remain pretty strictly independent from each other. It's what you see right now in this divisiveness, this divisions, if you will, it shouldn't really be happening, right? There really shouldn't be teams. This was a completely unplanned thing for me to be saying. There shouldn't be teams. We should, generally speaking, everyone should be trying to figure out, what's going on and how to best address it, and being respectful for each other's views, and the need to crush and silence people who don't agree with us. I don't understand it. Well, I mean, I know why it's happening. But if it was genuine, if everyone was genuinely just trying to, figure things out and collaborate, that wouldn't be happening. If someone has ideas which are unique and even admittedly quite hard to believe, we shouldn't need to be calling out for that person to be silenced. Eventually, they're going to, if their idea has a lot of merit, it's going to work. It's going to rise up. And if it doesn't, well, it's not going to provide a lot of value to people, and it'll rise down. So I don't know. I mean, I got my own thing, and several other people. We all have our own approaches, and you'll notice that we're real people. I mean, we got real everyday logistics to deal with. This is we're not like these commodities, online commodities that are just always there and always available. And it's like, well, where's the rest of your life? Anyways, why I even needed to say that, but regarding this hypothesis, or that it's turning into a pretty strong hypothesis right now, that in 2001, there was a projection of a large scale anthrax attack or smallpox. And I have several of them listed, pieces of evidence in the 2001 anthrax attacks on the United States page. But I think what I really need is a separate page for it. And what I really wanted to do is just tonight, just focus on 3 books, okay, which go over this. 3 books in particular. There's probably a lot more. These are just the 3 that I refer to a lot. Now, why would there be have been so much focus on the anthrax and anthrax or a smallpox attack? I mean, it's nothing inappropriate. If there's someone has a genuine concern about their city or their nation, whatever, being subjected to perhaps bad decisions from culture, bad financial decisions, whatever the case is, and writing books talking about things that they fear may go wrong and perhaps how to correct them. I mean, that's totally legitimate. But there was a lot of focus on this. And it wasn't just these 3 books. It was throughout the United States government and its federal government in particular. There were multiple congressional hearings. There were new agencies being made, hearings for years. And it started around 96, 97, although you can actually see signs of it even before then. And very little of the discussion was ever about how to stop it. And it was almost a foregone conclusion that, well, this will happen because you can't stop it. So let's just figure out what we're going to do when it happens. And when it does happen, well, what do you talk about? You talk about quarantines. You talk about quarantines and lockdowns. You talk about crowded hospitals. You talk about the whole concept of contact and social distancing wasn't that strong then, but the signs were there. People worried about food. People worried about money. And of course, vaccines. And it was sort of like almost every article was like, they talk about this horrible thing that's going to happen. You can't stop it. And towards the end, it was always like, well, how are we going to vaccinate people? And we need to, and they would talk about new vaccine technologies, or they would imply that the current vaccine technologies are just inadequate. And therefore we will need better vaccine technologies. So there was a lot of rhyming between these articles, these books, the United States government talking about it, or at least certain people with the United States government talking about it nonstop. And then September 11th happened. And there was no large-scale anthrax attack or smallpox attack. And you could see that there was, as I put forward my hypothesis, a desperate attempt to reorient the events of 2001 to being around bioterrorism again, because that was always the goal. Now, why would there have been a preemption? I'm starting to drift away from talking about the books right now, but I think I have to get and review this anyways. There would have been a preemption because the beneficiaries of these attacks would have been a new policing agency, a new Department of Homeland Security. The beneficiaries would have been a real teardown of big parts of the constitutional enforcement at the very least. Can't say the Constitution would have been burned, but it would have been interpreted and enforced perhaps a bit differently, perhaps even new amendments. And, of course, new vaccines. And the vaccines, these new vaccines weren't out there because somebody wanted to make some money selling vaccines. That wasn't the point. The point was, how do you enter the new era of gene therapy? How do you start giving genetic medicine to people? How do you bypass the FDA? How do you get to the point where you can start truly advancing the genomics agenda? You're going to need to get the new medicine out there somehow, some way, and it's going to need to be a horrible attack like this. It wasn't really the money. Of course, there was money involved, but it wasn't really the money. The losers of this would have been the military-industrial complex. It doesn't really make vaccines. You know, they make weapons and they make bombers and guns and drones, missiles. There's all kinds of other things, not to mention all of the carriers and so on and so forth, but not really making gene therapy. And if you look at budget spending on the U.S. military-industrial complex, it had gone down very, very steadily throughout the 1990s. And it was, percentage-wise of U.S. budget, quite low going into 2000, 2001. Now, as someone who's been personally impacted by endless U.S. wars, I'm not really a big fan of more endless wars and pointless wars and so on and so forth. But I do, at the very least, acknowledge that there is this that faction was being less and less funded, and they received an enormous financial boom as a consequence of 2001, the September 11th hijackings. And the other loser would have been countries which are very much dependent upon the United States. In particular, that's Israel. Whether you love them or hate them, I think we can all agree that Israel does depend upon U.S. Financial support and U.S. military. And Israel would have been up the creek with this new reimagination of the United States. And isn't it just... And so therefore it's so obvious that you have Israel and you have the military-industrial complex being part of the September 11th attacks. It's so obvious. Like, why would they do that? Because they wanted to destroy America? It doesn't make any sense. None of the narratives make sense. The only narrative that makes sense is it was a preemptive move because America was starting to go in a different direction. The genomics agenda was starting to become that powerful. And the anthrax letters were probably an agreement, amongst somewhere between 5 to 40 people. I'm guessing it was not a lone wolf. To bring back the fear of germs. And if you look at the U.S. newspapers, by the end of October 2001, no one was worried about plane hijackings anymore. They were only worried about, again, germs and how are we going to vaccinate. So in that sense, they were successful. That was the point of these letters. There was at some point going to be an airdrop, perhaps, of several hundred pounds of anthrax or something similar, probably in Washington, D.C., or more likely New York City in a crowded condition. It would have led to the situation where there would have been complete agreement or a nationwide push, and most citizens would have agreed because of the threat of this new era of germs and biological weapons to roll in the new era of vaccination technology, which is going to be DNA vaccination most likely. It wasn't the whole VaxGen stuff. It was Vical and other similar DNA vaccination. And that didn't happen. But that was what was supposed to happen. It didn't happen. And this is really the mystery of September. This is really the mystery of 2001 in a nutshell. I don't know why. I'm so confident in this. I'd be willing to be recruited to write books on it and to even work with people that wanted to expose us at greater levels. I don't know why this came to me, but it is what it is. So, because you can't just have the biological terror attack, and then people learning about it and figuring out what to do. Similar to COVID-19, there needs to be years of programming. Years of programming. People need to be breadcrumbed into it. People need to believe it. They need to expect it, and they need to be asking for what you want them to get. They need to be begging they need to be asking for new types of vaccine technologies before someone even gets up on a podium after the bioterror attack and say, guess what? We have new types of vaccine technologies. That's what all of this stuff was about. Anyways, I have so many articles. There are hundreds of articles. You can't even believe how many agencies, DTRA events, congressional events, and hearings and books. It was event after event after event after book after article. And there's basically 4 years of it. And then it didn't happen. Is it because they're all idiots? Or is it because the United States government has gotten to the point where we're not just talking bad leaders because someone gave a no-bid contract to their brother-in-law to build a new intersection, ramp, or someone did some inside trading. This is actually the point. The U.S. has actually reached a point where there were leaders willing to kill U.S. citizens to create a narrative to turn Americans into lab monkeys. Things have that happened during the 1990s when everyone was worried about Bill Clinton's cigar. This was boiling. It's amazing. But the first book, and I've talked a lot about this book here, okay? And it's not about anthrax in particular. It's called Big Shot AIDS Vaccine, okay? It was written by Patricia Thomas. The full title is Big Shot AIDS Vaccine, Passion Politics, and the Struggle for an AIDS Vaccine. Okay. This book was published the week after September 11th, 2001. It took 4 years to write, based upon the interview, the dates of the interview stated in the book. Now, while it's about an AIDS vaccine, okay, it highlights two companies in particular, okay? It does get into talking about monoclonal antibody technology. But the main companies it talks about are VaxGen, VaxGen. Actually, there's three companies. VaxGen, VaxGen, Chiron Corporation, Chiron, and the third one is Vical, Vical. The book has a bit of it sort of occasionally paints the management of VaxGen, VaxGen, to be a little bit moronic. Some of the people that worked at VaxGen, its founder was Robert Nowinski, who worked up at the Fred Hutch Institute and actually came out of the Chester Southam lab when he was much, much younger, Memorial Sloan Kettering in New York City. And they made what do you call it? I can't think of the name of it right now, but it was a synthetic adjuvant to help provide, help people have an immune response, which would supposedly help them should they ever be exposed to HIV. The other company was Vical Corporation, which had a DNA vaccine in the works to protect people against HIV. And then there's Chiron, which I'm still having a hard time understanding how Chiron's technology compares to Vical. I'll get to that at some point. I have to clarify that. Now, while this book talks about the AIDS vaccine, okay, the thing with that, all these AIDS vaccines, and in particular the ones from Chiron and Vical, okay, is that they get in, these are gene therapy approaches. This is gene therapy approaches. And with the problem being HIV, the wonderful, this as HIV presents itself in the AIDS crisis, now with these tools just happen to provide what many have been looking for, and as part of this genomics agenda, which is to how do you get gene therapy out there. Now, VaxGen was also working on an anthrax vaccine, and Vical was also working on an anthrax vaccine. And Chiron was also in the business as well. And again, I need to clarify exactly what they were doing at some point for my own education, and I'll pass it on to you. Now, because it's going to be, there really wasn't going to be a situation where you're going to have an attack with HIV, and then voila, now you can roll out gene therapy to protect millions of people or troops supposedly against HIV, but you can't with anthrax. So what I propose is that what this book is really doing is it's getting people ready for all of the new anthrax vaccine technology. That's what this book was about. And it came out the week after September 11, 2001. It was just coincidence that was the planned release date. It was probably going to give people two or 3 months to read it. Because if there was then, let's just throw a date out there, Thanksgiving Day parade, New York City, 2001, an anthrax attack. Well, this book is a nice guide to this technology. And coincidentally, as the troops are getting pumped up with their experimental gene therapy, books like this and other people can say, guess what? All of that research on HIV is paying off. And now, good news, we're going to be able to use it going forward. Isn't this a win-win? I know that anthrax attack was really awful, but good news. The future is now bright and sunny. A couple of alarming points, though, about this book, okay, that I've mentioned before, is that although it references many people, okay, one of the, I would say in the top 2 or 3, possibly the most, but top 2 or 3 people that is most quoted in this book, it's not Anthony Fauci. It's Nancy Hagewood, an HIV researcher and also works in primatology, who is the person who says that Bruce Ivans harassed her back in college in the late 1970s and provided evidence to the FBI or testimony that suggested Bruce Ivans, who took the fall for the anthrax letters, was the sole person responsible. That is quite a coincidence, isn't it? Now, of course, Bruce Ivans didn't become the primary witness until 2006. Before then, it was Stephen Hatfield, and FBI looked at a variety of other people. But isn't that just shocking that that person was in this book as this primary researcher? It's not impossible, but it's quite the coincidence. Even more remarkable, as I mentioned before, Nancy Hagewood worked with a Gary Rhodes and a John Wolfe. Trying to think of the other name here, but all people who Robert Malone also worked with at Vical Corporation and were on Robert Malone's patents in 1989, meaning the main accuser of Bruce Ivans has probably, Nancy Hagewood, known Robert Malone since 1989 or 1988 even. And she's featured in this book that came out the week after September 11th, 2001. There's a lot of talk about all these notebooks, stolen notebooks, and these codes that Bruce Ivins talked about. I don't even know what to make out of it. They needed a fall guy. That's what it came down to. And Bruce Ivins didn't do it. Which means the entire biosecurity state, BARDA and everything else, Department of Homeland Security, which exists only to prevent people against future anthrax letters and anthrax attacks and so on, is still unable to solve the one and only thing that it was created for. Talk about, look, that is like the definition of failure. The second book, which I referenced before, was written by Michael Osterholm of University of Minnesota, and this thing called SIDRAP, which is some type of emergency response group of some sorts up in University of Minnesota. And, of course, Osterholm and COVID-19 was one of the very first people on Joe Rogan talking about coronaviruses. He's also the postdoc, one of the two postdoc advisors of Andrew Huff. But Osterholm is not really a new face. If I may here, let's see if I go back up to my index. Anyways, Osterholm has been involved in emergency responses and even the HIV crisis of the 1980s and 1990s. I'll go over his timeline in a bit, but this book called Living Terrors, What America Needs to Know to Survive the Coming Bioterrorist Catastrophe, co-authored with John Schwartz, by the way, who I'm not familiar with. It's published in October of 2001, 12 months before the anthrax letters, and very, 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 very clearly predicts an anthrax attack or smallpox using crop dusters or putting this stuff into ventilation systems. Now, thinking about that and talking about that in and of itself is no crime. But just to share with you some of the oddities here, let's see. He was so convinced that there was going to be some type of terrorist attack in 2001 that, see, this is the morning newspaper on September 12th, 2001. I'll get my head out of the way a little bit here so you can appreciate this. That Michael Osterholm on September 12th, 2001 is quoted as talking about emergency responses. And he said, the newspaper went on to say, a key problem in planning medical responses and in deciding how many patients to send to any given hospital is knowing whether New York has seen all that its terrorist attackers had in mind. Dr. Michael Osterholm said, quote, the really difficult thing right now is not knowing if there's another shoe to drop. Unquote. Michael Osterholm of the University of Minnesota, one of the world's leading experts on medical responses on terrorism. Matter of fact, just hours before yesterday's attack, either on September 10th, 2001, or in the middle of the night of September 11th, 2001 in the morning, Osterholm was in a classified Washington, D.C. meeting on counterterrorism. Osterholm said, quote, has there been any biological agent released today? Are they going to do something next? We're so used to consequences. We're so used to going to consequence management, not deterrence. This has rewritten all the books. Unquote. This is, I think, in one of the New York Times, news. This was in the Newsday section. It's just noteworthy that Osterholm was in the dark winter exercises. On September 5th, 2001, Osterholm's book was actually mentioned by Joshua Lederberg. Watch my video on him. While Joshua Lederberg was presenting, or having at least his something read, to Joe Biden, who was the head of the Senate Foreign Relations Subcommittee, talking about an anthrax or smallpox biological terror attack in a major U.S. metropolitan center. And of course, how are we going to fix that? We can't stop it. So let's talk about the vaccine stockpile. Interesting that Osterholm did have a data collection and analytics company that he left in August of 2001, taking a new job within the University of Minnesota. He has, according to this one here, yes, this was the Dark Winter exercises, August of 1999. Here he is with Maggie Hamburg, FDA director under Obama, and Donna Shalala, who inaugurated that nice Joe Murtha Breast Cancer Research Center in rural Pennsylvania, in Windber, and Jerry Hauer, the guy who walked on with a freshly pressed suit in the midday of September 11th, 2001, into the studio of Peter Jennings and said that Building 7 was looking kind of shaky. And who else was there? D.A. Henderson, the man who's responsible for effectively ending the need for smallpox vaccinations worldwide because he was able to eradicate smallpox using some ring vaccination technology. Jessica Stern, Counsel of Foreign Relations. Of course, Joshua Lederberg was there. General Parker, Tara O'Toole, the Terrible Tool, Philip K. Russell, Thomas Inglesby. You get the general idea. Here he is in other congressional testimony presenting with, again, Jerry Hauer and Maggie Hamburg on March 25th, 1999. And here he is. This is talking about 1998 New York Times, new lethal bacteria, so on and so forth. And of course, he was part of the predictive programming for COVID-19. We have the videos with Daszak. Matter of fact, there's an excellent video I found with him with Chris Drosten, the very guy who announced that COVID-19 was now a world emergency. Michael Osterholm and Peter Daszak and Drosten were talking about coronaviruses and potential future emergencies in a 2013 Science article. So either he is the real deal Nostradamus, or I don't know. But I wager and I put forward the position that this is all part of predictive programming. Now, the third book I wanted to introduce, and I didn't even get to, oh my goodness, all the stuff from Jarling. Wow. That guy was definitely more smallpox. He was definitely a virus guy. He's not really an anthrax guy, but that's a whole other thing. But let's go back to our Anthrax 2001 here, because I think this is perhaps amongst the most, this is possibly even more comical than than the previous two. So on October 2nd, 2001, New York Times author, I should say New York Times reporter Judy Miller, and two other people, including Stephen Engelberg, and the other one was William J. Broad, published a book called Germs, Biological Weapons in America's Secret War. This was published October 2nd, 2001. Now, oh. Anyways, I have a copy of it you can download. I found the full PDF on Internet Archive. I think it has like 200 references to Joshua Lederberg. It's basically, I can't believe how much stuff is in this book. It's incredible. But this book took at least 2 years and probably 3 or 4 years to write as well. Similar to this, these books weren't written overnight. These books were not written in a month or year. These books were epic, and the amount of interviews involved. So her book was released, Germs, Biological Weapons in America's Secret War, which talks, again, extensively about anthrax, including the calculations of how many pounds of anthrax needs to be in the hull of the plane, flying over the crowd to kill a certain number of people, and of course, all of the things which will happen afterwards, including the lockdowns and the new security state and the DNA vaccines. One interesting tidbit from this book is I didn't know Joshua Lederberg was actually the man who created the word plasmid. Talk about being integral to this whole story. Anyways, this book was released on October 2nd, 2001. And I can tell you that the book was expected for a long time because, let's see, I have this mentioned down here. I captured this. And again, sorry for having to scroll so fast here. Gosh darn it. Let me just go back up to where we have the description of the book. Because on November 13th, 2001, the science TV series Nova, which I think is public television in the United States, aired an episode called Bioterror, which took 2 years to make. Now, if the movie or the episode took 2 years to make, presumably the book was already 2 years into the making by that time. So that's how much of an investment these books are. These are big, big, big books. And you talk about the terror, you talk about the history, you talk about how many people will be killed. And of course, it always goes down to, well, there can be strains and there can be mutations. And how do you have enough vaccines? And how do you make the vaccines fast enough? That's always, it's like all conversations lead to, well, I guess we need new vaccines. All of them. And I'm left to conclude that that's the goal of all of this. And it's not because some company wants to make a few dollars. It's not because someone is going to, profit sharing. It's because the demand to get to the new era of gene therapy is so big and so deeply funded and so desired that it's spare no expense. At some point, it was determined that the best thing that the United States has to offer is a diverse population to be used as test monkeys. There you go. It's pretty horrifying, but it is what it is. So now a couple notes about here that is just going to, this is the icing on the cake with respect to this book here. Again, you can download it and you can read it. I haven't read it yet. I've just searched through it. Is not only does Judith Miller have this book released, okay, and now it's been in printing for a while, and the first day you can buy it is on October 2nd, 2001. But this is the part that gets, okay. Judith Miller of the New York Times Okay, probably not her best photo. This was Miller in 2018. She's 76 years old right now. So, not only is this book published, but she then, on October 12th, 2001, is the very first and only recipient in any New York news agency of a hoax anthrax letter, which was sent to her from St. Petersburg, Florida, supposedly. Why? And then I'm not logged in. I have a New York Times subscription, but I'm not logged in here, so I apologize for that. But then by October 14th, 2001, she had almost a full-page New York Times article to talk about her experience opening an anthrax letter. At some point, as a parent or now a grandparent, you have those moments where, you told your child not to eat any chocolate, right? Don't eat the chocolate bar. I'm just trying to simplify it a little bit. And you go to look for the chocolate bar, and the chocolate bar is missing. And then you find your child or your grandchild and say, "Did you eat the chocolate bar?" And they say no. And you just see the chocolate on their face. And you see chocolate on their hands. Maybe a little bit on their pants because they tried to wipe it off because they knew they were going to get in trouble. And you're just like, well, I don't have a video of them eating a chocolate, but the totality of the evidence suggests strongly that this little kid just ate the chocolate bar. Come on, Judith Miller, please. It's an unbelievable story of all the other people. And here's the thing: if the terrorists really wanted to commit terror, okay, why did they send her a hoax? Wouldn't have been, again, I don't wish ill upon her, but wouldn't have been more effective to send her a real anthrax letter? It's unbelievable. It really is unbelievable. Of course, no return address on that one. They traced it to St. Petersburg, Florida. Obviously, there's been no investigation as to who really sent it, but whatever. Judith Miller is a whole lot more than just someone who writes news articles from the New York Times. She's part of the machine. Unbelievable. Anyways, there was a following on here, a couple more interesting points just to add to this, and then I'm gonna move on. Go get to sleep here. Is that on October 23rd, 2001, the New York Times ran an article called "A Nation Challenged: The Strategy September 11th Attacks Led to Push for More Smallpox Vaccine." So here it's basically confessing here that they were looking to boost up vaccines the moment the people were jumping out of the buildings. It doesn't make any sense. They're actually trying to justify this now because she's part of the machine. And what I find noteworthy here is that Judith Miller, who survived her hoax anthrax letter, co-authored this with Cheryl Gay Stolberg, who was the person who worked with Robert Malone while Robert Malone was being, as Robert Malone describes, the whistleblower for Jesse Gelsinger in 1999. That is just remarkable. That is just remarkable. I have so many articles. I have the DTRA conference talking about anthrax and smallpox, and was it late August or early September 2001? There's just, it's so much. They were all talking about this. I'm not, and it's very easy to look at something awful. Well, I don't even have to go there, but let's just say that the range of possibilities of what happened on September 11th is not if there were no plane hijackings or whatever it was, buildings collapsing. The opposite of that was not peace and tranquility. Let's just put it that way. Whatever happened on September 11th, 2001 wasn't necessarily a great thing. But the opposite of that is not nothing. It's very easy. And this is, I upset a lot of people because I look at Operation Warp Speed the same way for coronavirus. The opposite of that was not everyone goes about their business. If you get a phone call that your spouse was walking down the street and down in the city, and then someone ran up to her or him and looked like they assaulted them, and they were pulled down and they dislocated their shoulder. The opposite of that is not they would have been fine. Maybe the opposite was going to be they were just about to walk in front of a bus and get hit by a bus, and some person violently pulled them out of the way and dislocated their shoulder. You have to be really careful. You can easily say that this or that is bad, but these are not simple events that are just happening in a vacuum, disconnected with everything else. There's a lot of moving parts here. So, as bad as 2001 was, I don't know. Just keep that in mind. That it could have been even worse. So, with that said, those are the three books: Judith Miller, Michael Osterholm, and again, Big Shot AIDS Vaccine. I have Big Shot AIDS Vaccine. I've started doing the reading over 2 years ago right now. I'll probably start it again at some point to narrate it because I've learned so much since I've started to read this book. The Osterholm book, I don't have a PDF for. And if you do go to my website and go to the 2001 Anthrax Letters page, you'll find a PDF download link for the Judith Miller book, which is also on Internet Archive. So if you don't want it from me, you can get it directly from them. Perhaps I'll make a whole page sometime with just the text on it. So that's it, everyone. Hope this was useful. Hope this was fun, educational, if you will, enlightening. 14 days in a row now with a video. Pretty cool.